What's on, ladies and gentlemen? My name's Ross, I like games, and today I'm going to do something that I haven't done for a little while. I'm going to go and have a little bit of a look at some Keyforge. Now, I've had a bunch of questions from people basically asking me, Wossy, why no Keyforge videos? And there are two main reasons. Firstly, Keyforge went very, very quiet for a pretty long time. And secondly, my Keyforge videos, really, people lost interest in them. And I know that sounds really mean, and I'm sorry about that, but that's just the way it is. People stopped watching the Keyforge videos, and the combination of lack of interest and lack of news really did put me on a hold for a little while. However, we do have Dark Tidings. That new set has just gone and dropped. We do have some new Keyforge to talk about, so I'm going to make a deal with you. I'm going to make some new Keyforge videos, and if these do well enough, I'm going to go back to making regular Keyforge videos, which, to be fair, I couldn't have done for the past few months. There really wasn't the news. We didn't even have any tournaments to look at winning decks. But I'm willing to make some more Keyforge videos. And let's start off looking at all the cards from Dark Tidings. And we're going to start with logos, because I love me some logos. So we might as well go through in set order. We've got Dr. Veroca. What we've got is a 2-cost card with Elusive. Always quite nice, means you gotta break the elusive and then actually go and attack into it. And when you reap, you put an upgrade or action card from your discard pile on top of your deck. But you're gonna draw it at the end of your turn, and Logos is a house that has a bunch of draw. So being able to reuse your upgrades or actions, having elusives, you're gonna stay on the field a bit longer. That sounds good to me. Rooftop Laboratory is an artifact, and it says that each friendly scientist creature enters play ready. This is ridiculous. I adore this card. Because, of course, generally speaking, you enter and you're not allowed to reap or attack. You've got to wait till next turn. Well, here you don't. And we've seen this before. We saw Duskwitch with Omega. And it says your creatures enter play ready, but it ended your turn when you played it, and then your opponent would take it out, and it would never actually work. But this is just an artifact, and it's just a standard, it sits in play doing its thing kind of thing. I adore this card. It means you get extra reaps and extra fights your opponent wasn't expecting. Go team, quite frankly. Now, Reckless Experimentation is an upgrade that gives you an amber bonus, and you put it on a creature, and that creature gains reap. Play the top card of your deck. Now, it's called Reckless Experimentation, and it is reckless, because you might hit a board wipe that you are not ready to play. It could backfire massively, but you get to not only play an extra card, but you get to play a card that isn't in your hand, you get to play a card that might not be from your active house. It is cheating out the wazoo, but it could backfire. You have been warned. I mean, it's Wild Wormhole. And we've all seen that Wild Wormhole can be amazing. And we've all seen that Wild Wormhole can backfire hilariously. So, you've been warned, ladies and gentlemen. You have been warned. Now, Groundbreaking Discovery is an action card with an amber bonus. And if you control Dr. Veroca, Rooftop Laboratory, and Reckless Experimentation, which of course is quite a lot, you may destroy each card in play, unforge an opponent's key, and purge Groundbreaking Discovery. I mean, it's quite a lot, and it's a lot to get rolling, but you know what? When this works, oh my goodness, your opponent is in a lot of trouble. Now, Backup Plan is an action card, and when you play it, for each creature your opponent controls more than you, archive the top card of your deck. And we've all seen that logos are great with the archiving. It's one of their things. So this just lets you archive a whole bunch of cards. If that's what your deck does, brilliant. If it's not what your deck does, I don't know, maybe hold off just a little bit. Now, Captain Chrisage comes in as a 6-cost 0-armor creature, and while you control another creature with elusive, taunt, poison, or skirmish, Captain Chrisage gains that keyword, which is clearly a lot of fun. So it can be elusive, so your opponent has to attack twice to take you out. Taunt, so your opponent has to go after yourself rather than your neighbours. Poison, so if you deal any damage, you take out the creature. Or skirmish, so you get to take them out while surviving. It's really quite good, ladies and gentlemen. And essentially, if you've got the right cards to pair with it, it is awesome. If you don't, obviously not. Now, speaking of a pair, this is the first Logos creature we can look at that has an evil twin. That is one of the big things about Dark Tidings. Some of these creatures have evil twins. Evil twin Captain Chrisage. 6 power, 0 armor. I might occasionally say cost instead of power. If I do, I'm really sorry. Too many Digimon videos. 6 power, 0 armor. Each creature loses elusive, taunt, poison, and skirmish. Now that is each creature, not each of your opponents. You lose them and your opponent loses them. But if you're not relying on them and your opponent is, clearly that's a good thing. If you are relying on them, I don't know, don't play them. Now, Chronophage comes in as a 3 power, 0 armor creature, and your opponent's creatures and artifacts all gain Omega. That is what we looked at with Duskwitch a moment ago. It means when you play the card, your turn ends. It is the last thing you do. Now, it's not going to affect upgrades, yay, or actions, but it will affect creatures and artifacts. This is going to really hurt your opponent. I love this one. Love the design of the card as well, mind you. Now, Honor's Keysis is an action card with an amber bonus, and when you play it, you forge a key at +7 current cost, reduced by 1 for each card you have played this turn, including this, and then if you do it, you have to purge Honor's Keysis. But bearing in mind, you get yourself an amber bonus when you play the card. If you've got, and this is awkward, right? But maybe you've got a Logos deck that will draw a bunch of cards. That is what Logos does. If you can get this working, it's key cheating, and it can work out brilliantly, but like so many of these key cheating cards, there is no guarantee. You very much got to take your chances. Now, Ruins of Arconis is an artifact that again gives you an amber bonus, and again, I adore the artwork on this. When you play it, you put 4 amber on Ruins of Arconis from the common supply, and you archive a card. After a player plays their 6th card in a turn, now bearing in mind you often don't play 6 cards, you can only play cards of the active house, etc. But if they do, if Ruins of Arconis is ready, you move each amber from Ruins of Arconis to that player's pool. I.e., if you do this wrong, your opponent gains 4 amber, and that is a bad thing. But like we just saw on Honor's Keysis, this is clearly a card which wants you to have a full Logos turn, and if you can get a full Logos turn, it is brilliant. Slrs Australis. It is an artifact with an amber bonus, or Australis, you know what I mean. It's got an action that lets you exhaust up to 3 friendly Logos creatures, but for each creature you exhausted this way, you play the top card of your deck one at a time. Now, I mentioned a moment ago cards like Wild Wormhole that can absolutely backfire. This is that, but 3 times in a row. So you could play 3 amazing cards, and again, you're playing cards that aren't in your hand, that's a bonus. You're playing cards that aren't of the active house, that's a bonus. But they could be board wipes, they could get rid of your own creatures, etc. It could go very, very badly, very, very quickly. You have been warned. Great, if it works. Now, Tide Warp is an artifact with an amber bonus, and at the start of your turn, if the tide is high, your opponent raises the tide, otherwise, you raise the tide. So, it is literally just an artifact that keeps raising the tide back and forth. But the thing is, raising the tide generally means you've got to take 3 chains. We don't want to take 3 chains sometimes, we just want to raise the tide. This will do it. Especially if you're playing against a non-Dark Tidings deck, so it doesn't matter if your opponent raises the tide. Yeah, I can see advantages to this. This one looks kind of fun. Now, Arcol's Callback is an action card with Omega. Yeah, Omega came around in the 2nd set and really hasn't been seen much. They seem to be leaning back on that a little bit in this set, which is kind of cool. and you draw 5 cards. Okay. Now, sometimes it's going to be garbage. Remember, you draw at the end of your turn. But if you've got a turn where you're not playing many cards, where you're not going to be able to draw a bunch of cards at the end of your turn anyway, this will draw you an extra 5 cards. It's brilliant. If you're ending your turn with like 0 or 1 card in hand, then this is kind of a pointless card. You might as well just discard it. But a lot of the time it will end up drawing you 1 or 2 at the worst. And that's better than just ending your turn, I suppose. Just bear in mind, it's not often going to leave you on like an 11-card hand. Be nice if it did. Now, Binary Moray is a 5-power, 0-armor card. After you raise a tide, you ready Binary Moray. After your opponent raises a tide, you exhaust it. And when you reap, you get to archive a card. Now, archiving is fun, and this is targeting archiving, so you can archive what you want. That's a good thing. And when you raise a tide, you get to ready it. If you're going to raise a tide during your turn anyway, brilliant. Use it's exhausted, raise a tide and ready it. It's not always going to work out that well, but when it does, it's kind of cool. And it also has an evil twin. 5 power, 0 armor with skirmish. And after you raise a tide, you ready it, and when your opponent raises it, you exhaust it. So instead of archiving a card when you reap, you gain skirmish, so you get to take out creatures without taking any damage back. It's cool. It's not stunning, but I kind of like it. It'll do. It'll do. Forgive or Forget is an action card with an option. You either archive 2 cards of different types from your discard pile, an upgrade and an action, for instance, or you purge up to 2 cards from each discard pile, and we don't know what's going to be the best here. If you've got a deck revolving around archiving, clearly do that. If your opponent's got really good cards you want rid of, clearly do that. Otherwise, not quite so sure. I'll be honest with you. Isotropic Core is an artifact that gives you an amber bonus. Each friendly creature gains hazardous 1. That is to say, you deal a damage when you get attacked before the fight actually happens. That's kind of cool. And you get an amber when you play it, and it's for all of your creatures. It's not stunning, but I can see some advantages. Mecha Boy gives you an amber bonus, is an artifact, and at the start of each player's turn, if the tide is high, they gain an amber. Now, especially when you're playing a Dark Tidings deck against a non-Dark Tidings deck, and you can essentially just gain an extra amber at the start of every turn, and you force your opponent to either raise a tide just to stop you and take free chains, or let you have them, that's kind of cool. Mind Bullets, there seems to be some kind of Tenacious D reference going on here. When you play it, you deal 1 damage to each creature for each card you've played this turn, including this one. Now, it says each creature. It does not say each enemy creature, which means yes, it will hit yours as well. And yes, that's a terrifying thought. However, it's another one of those cards we've seen that really wants you to play lots of cards during your turn, so if you've got that kind of deck, why not? Now, Prof Garwin comes along as a 3-power, 0-armor creature. She has Elusive, and when you reap, you may choose a card in your archives and put it into your hand. And this one could be absolutely brilliant, because of course what you do is you build up your archive, and then not only do you get an extra card during your turn, but you get to choose that card. You get the choice of which card it is, and you get to make sure you've got the one which is going to be the best for you. Sounds like fun, honestly. Oh yeah, and she's got an evil twin. She goes from Elusive to Skirmish, from Don't Hit Me to I'm Gonna Get You. And when you fight, you may choose a card in your archives and put it into your hand. So you go from Don't Touch Me, I'm Gonna Reap, to Let's Fight. I love these design-wise as a pair. I think it's very cool. Now, Think Twice is an action card that plays an action card from your discard pile and then purges it. So essentially, you get an extra use of one of your actions, which is good, but then you have to purge it and you can never use it again. I'm not sure, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not sure. Now, Armadrone is a 1 power free armor creature, and when you fight, you steal an amber. But because you've got free armor, you can fight smaller creatures and you'll lose armor, but that comes back and you're fine. You'll survive, you got some good stealing. And stealing is generally what we see from shadows, not from logos. So it's kind of cool. Evil Twin Armadrone goes up to 3 power but loses the armor, but when you fight you steal 2. And again, I'm loving these Evil Twins, because if you look at the artwork, Armadrone is sneaking in the window, Evil Twin Armadrone is smashing through the window. Love it. Because one is kind of poking away and stealing an amber, the other 2 is bursting in to steal 2. This is very, very cool. Australis Seaborg. And I know I'm pronouncing this wrong, and I know it shouldn't sound so Australian, and I'm sorry. But I know I've got some viewers in Australia, and I love you, and please don't hate me. We got a 4 power, 0 armor creature, and when you reap, you deal 2 damage to a creature, any creature, yours or your opponent's, don't worry about it. And if this damage destroys a creature, you raise the tide. So it's just another option for raising the tide, and we've seen there are reasons why you'd want to raise the tide. This will let you do so. Bill's Warden is a 2 power, 0 armor creature, and when you play or reap, if the tide is high, your opponent raises it. Otherwise, you raise the tide, i.e. it will just switch the tide around. Again, I'm not loving this because you might not want to. This isn't an option, this is an it happens. So if you want to keep the tide high, well, if it's high and you play it, your opponent raises the tide, that's not so much fun, if I'm honest with you, so yeah, sorry about that. Final Analysis is an action card that destroys each creature, yours and your opponent's, and each creature draws a card for each creature they controlled that was destroyed this way. So it's a board wipe withdrawing, and this is a weird one to me, and I really don't like it. Because either you get rid of a few of your creatures and a lot of your opponents, but they draw a bunch of cards, or you get rid of a few of your opponent's creatures and a lot of your creatures, but you draw a bunch of cards. It's hurting you and your opponent, but it's helping you and your opponent, and I honestly don't know how often it's going to give you a big advantage. Now, Hydro Cataloguer is an artifact that gives you an amber bonus, and after a player raises a tide, they archive the top card of their deck. I'm still not, I don't know how much I like this one. It is random archiving, and like we've said many times before, random archiving is not as good because you can end up with a whole bunch of different houses in your archive, and the archive when you take it is all or nothing. What you really want to do is build up an archive of one house, and then you take all of it and have a monster turn, and we've seen that there are some cards in this set that really want you to do that. And to be fair, your opponent having a randomly archive could hurt them, but it's random archiving, and I don't know. I don't know how often it's really going to make a huge difference. Old Egad is a 1 power, 2 armor creature, and when it's destroyed, you ward each of Old Egad's neighbours. That's a counter that says next time they would be damaged, destroyed, or otherwise removed from play, they're not, which is kind of fun. Got to be destroyed first, but you can easily just throw this at one of your opponent's creatures to do that, and then you get to ward 2 creatures of your, well, the ones next to it. Yeah, that sounds pretty good to me. Now, Old Egad has an evil twin, and you'll notice evil twins tend to be a little bit fightier, and what we've got is a 3 power, 0 armor, and when it's destroyed, you enrage each enemy creature, forces them to fight where they might want to reap, etc. But you know what? I actually really like this, because if your opponent can reap to victory, and we've all had a million games where our opponent is in a stage where they can reap to victory, or where we get into that stage, that means you can basically force your opponent to have to fight instead, and that could be a big advantage. P.I. Sweven is a 2 power, 0 armor creature, and when you reap, if the tide is high, you draw 3 cards. Now, drawing 3 cards when you reap is nuts, and I love it, because then you're drawing those 3 cards and they're available to use right now. And this is one of those where the tide has really got to be high, but we've seen we got options for raising the tide here. Or we've got Evil Twin P.I. Sweven, and when you reap, if the tide is high, your opponent discards a random card from their hand. I'm going to be honest with you, I love regular P.I. Sweven. I don't like the Evil Twin here, like, much at all. Sure, discarding a random card's annoying, but I would rather have 3 extra than get rid of 1 from my opponent. The very appropriately named Science is an action card, and for the remainder of the turn, after you play another action, gain an amber. Now, we've seen this set loves when you play lots and lots of cards in the same turn, and again, building up an archive is the best way to do it. Have a big logos archive and then try and play like all 12 in one turn. If you can pull that off, it is nuts, but it is a hard combo to pull off. Static Charge is an upgrade that gives you an amber bonus, and this creature gains, at the start of your turn, deal 2 damage to each of this creature's neighbours. Oh. Yeah, this is one you put on your opponent. You don't put this on your own creature. And you know what? This could actually just start taking out your opponent's creatures. I kind of like this. Submersive Principle is an action card. When you play it, each player loses 1 amber. But if the tide is high, each player loses half their amber instead, rounded down. And I love cards like this. This is an emergency card, right? This is my opponent's got far too much amber, I need to control it, off you go. It rounds it down and gets rid of half, and it's, if they've got like 20 amber, they'll go to 10, they'll still be fine. But it will at least control them a bit. It can backfire a lot, so it's another one of those you need to make sure you wait until it's going to hurt your opponent, which means that you might have to hold it in your hand, but as we've seen, you draw up at the end of your turn. You don't often want to keep cards in your hand, because then you're drawing fewer cards at the end of your turn. It is in fact a great card to archive and pull back later. Talmage Steelheart is a 3 power, 0 armor creature, and when you play it, you give Talmage Steelheart a +1 power counter for each card you've played this turn, including this one. Yes, it's another one of those. I get the feeling there are going to be some logos decks out there in Dark Tidings that are going to be able to build up a huge archive and have a nuts turn and have loads of draw, etc., and they are going to be beastly. But that is what we're relying on here, because frankly, if you don't have a huge turn, this just ends up being a generic, fairly weak creature. Now, there is an evil twin here. When you play, you deal damage to an enemy creature equal to the number of cards you played this turn, including this one. So again, we very much got opposites. You either have a super powerful creature, or you take out one of your opponent's creatures. Theory or Conjecture is an action card that gives you an option. You either archive the top 2 cards of your deck, or you play the top 1 card of your deck. So it's Wild Wormhole with an option, but no amber bonus. And I like this, but again, playing the top card of your deck randomly, and we've seen a few cards in this set that will, can be a pain. Can backfire. But archiving the top 2 cards of your deck randomly can build up a substandard archive, so I leave that one up to you. And there we go, ladies and gentlemen. All of the new logos cards that we have seen in Dark Tidings. I've always liked logos. Logos is fun here, and I suppose the theory is if you can build up an archive and have a big monster turn, this is awesome. We've got key cheating, we've got board wiping, there's a whole bunch of stuff to love here. But shall we say, it is not quite the monster house it could be outside of some of these big combos. But now it's over to you guys. I want to know what you think, so let me know in the comment section. Go nuts, be nice, and do let me know if you want more Keyforge videos and share these around, etc., because honestly, the hype for Keyforge seems to have died down a little bit. I kind of would like to be part of the reason it was building up again. Let's do it together, ladies and gentlemen. I believe in us. Go nuts, be nice. And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at the Wossy. That's where we talk about a whole bunch of card games, including Keyforge. And do consider checking out patreon.com/PTCG Radio, where you can support the channel, get some bonus podcasts, all kinds of fun things. But by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching Wossy Plays.